I want to welcome on a special guest to help me preview this game, Jake Ellenbogen. He is the host of the Off Edge Show, CEO of Downtown Rams, host of Believe in Rams, and also a writer for Turf Show Times. Jake, welcome onto the show, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Cody? Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man. I'm doing well. We were talking off air, feeling pretty good about the Colts right now, sitting at 2-1 atop of the division. I tell you, man, the last couple of years have not been used to this. Typically, the Colts have come off to these really poor starts. So it's very refreshing to have the Colts, sitting where they're sitting right now and, off of kind of a 2-game away schedule there. Now have 4 of their next 5 at home. Definitely feeling good about that. So feeling good overall, man. And also feels good that the Colts are actually going to, potentially probably get back their starting franchise quarterback, which is definitely a good sign.
Absolutely. Big Anthony Richardson fan here. I believe he's got an astronomically high ceiling to the point where I was saying, you got your Patrick Mahomes up there. I wouldn't be surprised if someday we're talking about Anthony Richardson as that, like, okay, he's a step above everybody else. Just when you watch him play the game, the little things that he can't do right now or not do as well as others, he's going to figure out. He's got a great coach to figure that out in Steichen, and I'm not at all worried about his development and the things that we've seen, albeit he hasn't, made it through all the games or anything like that. But just what I've seen is that this guy can last in the NFL.
Well, yeah, the big thing is for him, he at least so far through 3 weeks, he just needs to protect himself better. That's kind of the biggest thing for him. Suffered that concussion in week number 2 against Houston. Was dynamic. 2 rushing touchdowns in the first quarter. You're like, oh man, could he have a historic day as a rookie just with what he's able to do, on the ground and also obviously with his arm. But yeah, he's got to protect himself. But definitely great to see that he and Ryan Kelly are coming back. In this game, which is great to see, especially because, we're facing one of the best, if not the best, interior defensive linemen of all time. So really excited for that matchup. And so, but before we kind of get into some of the matchups, man, curious your thoughts on the Rams so far through 3 weeks, because 1 and 2, I know there's been some games that, and you talked off air, even the Monday night game where the Rams were in it for the majority of the game and just ultimately couldn't finish out. So how do you feel about the Rams so far through 3 weeks? Season's still very early, so the Rams have a lot of opportunities still, but not a great season for them last year. So how do you feel now that you have, obviously, Matthew Stafford back and a lot of pieces right now on your offense and defense? How are you feeling about the Rams through 3 weeks?
Yeah, Cody, I'll tell you, I could sit here and say they should be 3-0. I don't think that's the case. I do think your record represents who you are. If you want to make that case, I'd say 2-1 is fair, but the Rams had every opportunity to win Monday Night Football. I think at this point, Cody, all I want to see is them not play on primetime ever again. Because it just seems like McVay gets into this tunnel vision where if you didn't see the Seattle game, that was what we want the offense to look like. And that did not have Cooper Kupp. So, you see they ran the ball 40 times. They threw it 38 to Atwell, 119 yards through the air. Puka Nacua, 119 yards. And so that's some good stuff right there. But then, week 2, Sean McVay in 1 possession games has never run it fewer times than he has the last 2 games in 1 possession games with 14 and 10 back to back. So I think really going into this season, while there was definitely a heavy emphasis on protecting the quarterback, because obviously last year, there was also a huge emphasis. Let's go out. Let's get Mike LaFleur. Let's get a new body in the building, a new mind, and let's get us running the football and balancing out our offense. And so McVay did that extremely well week 1, but I've seen back-to-back games now when things don't go, they don't stay going your way the whole game like Seattle. Then, he gets a little panicky. And so I think the Colts have a huge opportunity in this one with the defense that they have. Hey, if you don't want to run the ball, we got some ballers that can come after Stafford, that can hunt the quarterback, but we also have some guys in the secondary that you have to be aware of. And, we talked about off air, Juju Brents, the young corner. And I think especially like Julian Blackman and guys like that in the back end of the secondary, Stafford, he's not an interception prone quarterback because he makes poor decisions. But when you're constantly throwing the ball, you're giving the defense more opportunities. So it's not from the aspect of, a Desmond Ridder who has 8 turnover plays this year and he's thrown the ball way less than Stafford. That doesn't look good. It's more so, Stafford throws it so much that those turnover worthy plays, if you will, they can be at 2, they can be at 3. But when you're throwing the thing constantly, sometimes you're going to have plays where it's a turnover. It's not your fault. Tipped at the line of scrimmage, easily telegraphed. And I think that's kind of what the Rams did on Monday Night Football, is that Lou Anarumo gave these guys a pre-snap look repeatedly, making it look like, okay, daring them to throw the football. Even Mike LaFleur came out and said that. And so they checked out of a lot of runs. And so I don't think they can be doing that moving forward. I think they got to balance it out because keep in mind, they've been banged up a little bit. Excuse me. I nearly choked on nothing. They've been banged up a little bit coming into this season. Like left tackle goes down last week. You look at Noteboom's gone down back-to-back weeks, the right guard. So to alleviate that, they should be running the ball, but it's been kind of all over the place. So we'll see. I mean, I don't really know what to expect because you think, they're moving forward and looking good through 2. And then that third game, there were moments where you're like, oh, I like the way they're driving the ball, but they kind of went away from what has been working and why they were the number 1 offense in the red zone going into that game, why they were the number 1 third down conversion offense going in that game. And they kind of, you saw they had like 1 third down conversion. It came very late in the game. So I think the Rams, they bring a lot to the table. They're going to be a pain to deal with as long as Sean McVay is calling a good game plan.
You mentioned some of the injuries. I want to just kind of get to that and touch on that briefly. I haven't seen, at least as we're recording this, Thursday's practice report, but Wednesday's practice report, a couple players did not practice. Tyler Higbee, Alaric Johnson, the tackle, and a couple guys, and also Ben Skoranek as well with an Achilles. Had a couple guys limited, Joe Noteboom, offensive lineman, and then Puka Nacua. How do you feel about the Rams' injuries, and kind of who do you kind of think in this game maybe has a chance to go, and who do you think potentially is going to sit out of this one?
I think the only one who's sitting out for sure is Cooper Kupp because he's on IR. I think the injury report this year has just been very like they don't want to get fined. Everything with Stafford last year. People saying, "Oh, he's hurt," and then he's not on the injury report. You're just not trying to get fined. So I think anything is getting put on there. That's not to say that these guys aren't banged up, but I think it's more banged up, bumped and bruised type deal and less about pure injuries. Like Les Snead filled in on the Sean McVay show and just flat out said, look, we feel good about Alaric Jackson, that he's going to be ready to go, for Sunday. So, that's him saying it. He's the GM. I like it. They got good news on that. So, I think they've stayed relatively healthy, through 3 games. Obviously, you're going to have those bumps in the road. They need to get more stability on the offensive line because if they keep having guys go down, that's going to be a problem. But aside from that, they've been relatively healthy.
Gotcha. Yeah, Indianapolis has been relatively healthy as well. Really the big injuries I talked about, Anthony Richardson, Ryan Kelly, who both practice back-to-back days now, probably will clear concussion protocol and probably will play in this game. So both these teams come in to this game pretty healthy, which is definitely great to see. You always hope that, can have strength on strength there. But looking at kind of this Rams offense, you mentioned it a little bit, trying to find that balance between the passing game and the running game. You guys come in right now, top 10 in yards. You come in pretty well in terms of passing the football, 4th overall in yards. The touchdowns are a little bit lacking, I would say, in terms of passing touchdowns. But how do you feel about overall this matchup with Matthew Stafford in this passing offense versus this Indianapolis defense that, talk about defensive line. You mentioned, some of those guys already. DeForest Buckner in the middle. We know what a force he can be. You obviously know him extremely well from his time in San Francisco. Samson Mebukam, who was on your guys' roster a number of years ago as well, and also with the 49ers last year. Kwity Paye, a lot of these guys. And then you mentioned Juju Brents as well, who really had a phenomenal game in his rookie debut. So how do you feel about the Rams' chances in this game with some of those young weapons and what they're able to do, potentially matching up against this Colts young secondary?
Yeah, well, I think, obviously the older, I believe he is the oldest quarterback in the league active now with Rodgers on the pine. But, Matthew Stafford, seeing every coverage in the book, seeing every type of corner, I think he's going to, try some things out, test that young secondary. Brents is coming off a great game against the Ravens. And I thought Lamar played well. Like, I thought Lamar has, become somebody who can really throw in the pocket now, but he's not Stafford in the pocket. And so I do think that there could be, you talk about your peaks and valleys as a rookie. You talk about, your growing pains. I think this could be one of those games where Stafford, kind of tests him out. I also think the thing the Rams do extremely well is when they want to throw, they're having these guys motion. And what they're doing with Tutu Atwell is getting historically low numbers in press coverage. I mean, it's insane. No one can press Atwell. It's so hard because what you do is you take what Mike McDaniel's doing in Miami with Tyreek Hill, you emulate that, see how it can work best to fit your offense and fit your script. And then you see Atwell and, he can line up everywhere. And I think that was really kind of the cheat code here for the Rams is that while Cooper Kupp is out, Tutu Atwell's eating. While Cooper Kupp's out, Puka Nakua's eating. And so Van Jefferson has one big catch that we had on Monday Night Football that we saw. But aside from that, he hasn't really done a lot. Tyler Higbee started getting going last week. So I think obviously the hope is that Cooper Kupp is back for them week 5, but this is the last, this is the last chance essentially to get these targets. And I think these guys are going to be chomping at the bit. I think Stafford's going to want to throw it, but I also think that putting that much tape out there of them throwing the ball when it was a one possession game almost the entire game, they led almost half the game, more than half the game, and they weren't running the football. I wouldn't be surprised if they come out running the football and maybe try to take the Colts a little bit off guard. Not saying that they wouldn't be, not expecting it, but I mean, I'll be honest with you. If I was going against the Sean McVay offense right now, I wouldn't be expecting the run at all. So we'll see what happens. Kyron Williams going into last week was leading the league in, for running backs with touchdowns from scrimmage with 4. Going into the week, of course, obviously, both the Miami Dolphins running backs definitely tied that, or if then some. But I think Kyron is going to be a huge X factor in this game. We were expecting a big performance, out of him against Cincinnati, and that just didn't happen. They only gave it to him 10 times for 36 yards. So I think they'll try to kind of reestablish that run, or they won't, and it's going to be backyard football, and they'll try to win it, just throwing the ball.
Yeah, well, that was something also, in that game with some of the offensive line injuries. Cincinnati was able to do a lot in terms of getting pressure on Matthew Stafford. 6 times he got sacked in that game. And Indianapolis, I felt like, did a really good job on Lamar Jackson. There was a couple plays in particular where they were able to contain him. It's hard to contain Lamar as it is. And there was a couple plays where I'm like, that probably should have been the sack if it was any other quarterback. But because of Lamar, because of his ability, he gets out of that and, rushes, turns it into a first down or throws it away or whatever it is. How do you feel about this Indianapolis defense that sacked Lamar 4 times, is tied for number 2 right now in the league with sacks, against your offensive line who kind of struggled against Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not feeling great. I'll be honest with you. I think, we talked about this off air. This game went from being probably a surefire W before the season for Rams fans. I'm not saying that's how it was going to go, but a lot of Rams fans felt that way. To now, it's like this Colts team is going to be a little bit of a trap here if you get caught looking ahead at the big game against Philadelphia at SoFi. And so these two teams have had some interesting little beef with each other. You had, obviously, the fans were very upset. Carson Wentz gets knocked out the last time these two play. And Jacob Eason threw a pick to Jalen Ramsey to seal it. And of course, the big thing was, well, we think Carson Wentz could have gone down the field and probably won the game. So you knocked our quarterback out. I remember going back a little ways when these two played, and it was Chuck Pagano, and they asked him, like, who are you most fearing on the Rams side? And he didn't say Aaron Donald. He didn't say Johnny Hecker. Kind of a joke. Bill Belichick always says Johnny Hecker. But no, he said Tavon Austin. And I'll never forget the media laughing at him, just straight up laughing. Like, Tavon Austin, really? And he had 3 touchdowns in that game. So there's always been some weird thing go on. And I think I'm probably forgetting one where they did recently play, but it should be interesting because I think when you look on the offensive side of the ball, for the Colts, this is where it gets to be fascinating. The Rams defense is actually the better unit right now. And that's not something that I expected or anyone expected to be talking about. When you look at Ahkello Witherspoon averaging, what is it? He's given up 22 is the passer rating when targeted. Joe Burrow had a 3 passer rating when targeting Ahkello Witherspoon's side of the field. He's been magnificent. Darion Kendrick's been really good, albeit he had 3 penalties in the 49er game. So I look at them and what they've done this secondary going up against Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase. And I'm like, this is legit. This is not a fluke. And Raheem Morris has done wonders. And just think about this. Their pass rush isn't that great. You've gotten some great contributions, obviously, out of Aaron Donald. You've gotten some great contributions out of 2 rookies and Byron Young on the edge and Kobe Turner interior. But they have a pure liability on the other side in Michael Hoyt, who is a 310, 6-foot defensive lineman playing edge. And they have him dropping more in coverage than any other edge defender in the entire NFL for God knows why. So now you factor that in. Factor the fact they're not generating, say, the pressures that a Colts defense is. And it really goes to show you how good this secondary has been. So I look at them against Alec Pierce, who I'm very high on. Long-term, maybe not right now, but long-term, I think he's going to blossom. Michael Pittman Jr. is an absolute stud, okay? You have Isaiah McKenzie and Josh Downs. You might have another guy, but those are the 4 that I believe, you use the most. So those are the receivers. And I'm thinking Josh Downs in the slot could be kind of, if you're looking for any type of X factor, it's Josh Downs going up against Jacoby Durant. Durant has not looked great. And it's a shame because Durant looked awesome last year. I don't know if it's because he's playing the slot. I don't know. But he has not been great. He's given up, I believe, the 4th most receptions out of the slot in the league. And so I look at Josh Downs. This could be that game. He had the rapport from, training camp with Anthony Richardson. This could be his type of game where he needs to go off. And we saw it. Like, as great as this secondary has looked, they're not afraid to give up yards. They play bend don't break style with some controlled aggression in there. And we saw it. Jamar Chase had over 140 yards receiving, and they only scored 19 points. So Raheem Morris's defense is okay letting you go off, but I think they would much rather Josh Downs do that than a guy like Michael Pittman with the explosives and Alec Pierce with the explosives. And it's not to say that Josh Downs can't have those explosives, but coming out of the slot, I think that's where they're best to target the Rams. And then I think you look at the tight ends, And I'm a big fan of Kylan Granson. I don't think people talk about him enough. I really liked him coming out of college. It was one of my favorite tight ends in that draft. I believe it was 2021. They all kind of, blend in now. But I think Granson is kind of an X factor in this one too. Tight ends haven't killed the Rams, right? But we did get, George Kittle had some moments. Fant got open a little bit late in the game. And then you talk about last week, Tanner Hudson comes off the practice squad and, he makes a huge catch over the middle that kind of sets them up to kick that field goal right before half. So, I mean, I'm just saying, like, Kylan Granson had his touchdown. Everyone made a mockery of him because he was celebrating it the only way he wanted to celebrate it. But wouldn't be surprised if he found the end zone in this one.
Yeah. One thing that I think, as I was doing some research into this Rams defense, you look at them just from a pure stats standpoint when it comes to the running game. So in the running game right now, the Rams in total are 13th against the run. But here's where the big drop-off comes for me, Jake, is the Rams when it comes to yards per attempt. And I don't know why, what the discrepancy is if teams just aren't running it on the Rams, but 24th in yards per attempt allowed, right? Nearly 4.5 yards per carry allowed. And I look at a player like Zach Moss, who I think potentially, you talk about X factors, I think he's going to be a big X factor in this game because he's been back-to-back games now where he has just been, he's not the Jonathan Taylor break at 60 yards, but he's a guy that's consistently going to get yards. It's funny. It's like the Rams are allowing 4.5. Zach Moss is averaging like 4.4. So it's kind of crazy how that works. But I think about Zach Moss in this game, and just he's been the guy that's gotten the lion's share of the carries so far. And then you add in the other factor, like with Lamar Jackson, of Anthony Richardson, his legs and what he's able to do. If he can protect himself, of course, which we talked about. How do you feel about facing this Colts offense? Because, with the running game, Anthony Richardson in the games he's played, him and Zach Moss really haven't played together yet, to start the season because Zach Moss was not active week number 1. He's active week number 2. Richardson had like 2 or 3 drives with Zach Moss. So how do you feel about this game, the Colts running game, and what they could potentially do trying to establish that line of scrimmage, now having a healthy offensive line as well?
Well, what I'm wondering is if the Colts are going to tell, Anthony Richardson to calm it down on the running a little bit now that Moss is back. I think a lot of that before, Deion Jackson is not on the team anymore. And there's a reason, So I think they really had no choice. And I don't think they'd come out and say it, but I'm sure they kind of feel a little guilty, that Anthony Richardson got hurt. Like, hey, you have to do this because we don't have a run game. Now, fast forward and they have now 2 guys who I'm very high on, Zach Moss and Trey Sermon, who I don't think, people forgot about Trey Sermon, but I think the guy can play in this league. And those are 2 guys that can run with power. They also have some decent speed. I mean, Moss isn't a burner or anything like that, but Sermon ran like a 4.5. He's not a slow guy by any stretch, but no, you make a really good point because another thing is that teams often do against the Rams, and we saw this, like Christian McCaffrey, to be fair to the Rams defense, Christian McCaffrey had that one huge explosive run. After that, he averaged 3.6 yards per carry after that. So, they did have him bottled up. They only ran it 20 times with him, though. They ran it more. Well, they didn't run more with Debo, but they used Debo more. You look at Kenny Walker over in Seattle. My biggest thing with the Rams is that going into the Bengals game, I was like, you need to take advantage of the fact that this defense has shown the ability to give up some chunk plays in the run game. And simply put, the Seattle game, they shut them down so badly that Seattle ends up abandoning the run. And Walker's over 5.5 yards per carry in that game when they abandon the run. And so then you look at, week 2 and you're like, they start using Christian McCaffrey more in the receiving game. Elijah Mitchell didn't even get a snap in that game. So they're not really running the ball in that one. And then this third one here against the Bengals, I don't know what they were doing to start because Joe Burrow on his bum calf is going back to pass like 35 times. You can't have that many dropbacks, but eventually as the game wore on, they started running it more with Mixon. Now, I will say we saw some serious push to stop the run. They gave up the touchdown that kind of changed the game, but I was really impressed with the Rams defense, the way they kind of shut down Mixon, held him to under 3, I think it was 3.4 yards per carry. So it's interesting, but I think the thing here is that with the run game, it's so disrespected in the modern NFL. What people don't understand is I don't care if you're Matt Asiata running 30 times for 60 yards and averaging 2 yards per carry like he used to do all the time. Here's the thing. That still wears down a defense. So I'm looking at Zach Moss, and if they want to run it 30 times, I mean, that means that they were literally on the field enough to give 30 carries to a running back. And that tells me that that's probably going to be a deciding factor. If Zach Moss runs it 30 plus times, he's either really poor in this game or they just easily are going to put this game out of reach because, you can't allow that. And the thing is, the Colts have stuck with that, and they stuck with it against the Ravens. They didn't panic. They stuck with the run, and that's why they ultimately won the game, because they wore out the Ravens. I mean, let's be honest. It didn't have to be a ton. They didn't go down the field and score a game-winning touchdown in OT. They just needed a field goal, but it was just enough. And so that's the name of the game with the NFL. It needs to be just enough. And I think, Zach Moss being a more punishing back, more powerful back. And let's be honest here, that catch the other day, the back shoulder fade. I mean, this guy, he's a talented player. I didn't see it in Buffalo at all. I really liked him coming out. I think it was Utah, but I didn't see it in Buffalo. And then he goes to Indy, and now I see it. Like, I think he could be a really good running back in this league. It's probably why he's not Jonathan Taylor, but it's probably why they're balking at the idea of paying Jonathan Taylor, because they're like, I mean, we take that dynamic hit, but we have a dynamic player in Anthony Richardson. And I mean, Zach Moss is fine, so that might be honestly, more of the truth than we realize. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I think Zach Moss, he can absolutely be an X factor in this one. Trey Sermon can too, because if Zach Moss does get banged up, I think that's been his biggest issue. He's had injuries going back to college. If he does get banged up, you still have a Trey Sermon kind of built like that can withstand the punishment, can run with that, bully mentality. And he's got some sneaky speed where if he gets in the second level, now he's as big as the guys who are trying to tackle, if not bigger. So I do think that they have some stuff here. I'm not high on Jake Funk, so I know he was on the Rams, but I don't really have anything like great to say about him. He's just kind of a guy in my opinion. But when I look at those two guys, I do think in the backfield, Trey finally got a chance. He ran a little bit, and I expect that to continue, because if you're going to try to run it 28 times a game with Zach Moss, you also have to, keep him healthy, if you will. I think the best way is to, you want to run 40 times, run it 12 times with Trey.
Yeah, exactly. Well, man, I'm curious about your special teams. I mean, our kicker extremely well, Matt Gay. I'm sure you're a little bit upset that the Rams didn't bring him back, considering, that he just broke that record of 50-plus yard field goals. But talk to me about your guys' special teams and, how have you felt about the Rams special teams through 3 weeks?
It's kind of a mixed bag. I think they're doing, everything they can. The punter's great. Ethan Evans, who they got in, I think, the 6th round. Great. I really like what we've seen out of Maher. Although, yes, I would rather have Matt Gay. The guy, they don't win the Super Bowl without him, let's be honest. But they don't even get there without him. But return game, pretty, lackluster. And then I think the coverage team, I think the issue is the punter is so, Evans has such a leg, and you're going to see this on Sunday. He's probably going to boot it over one of your, punt returners' heads. The problem is, if your punt returner gets in good position to actually catch it, he's going to have 40 yards in front of him because he outkicks the coverage on the daily, essentially. And so that's the thing that is a little concerning. But I think that the special teams has been fine. I don't think it's not a super liability. I think it's just kind of it's a mixed bag. Like there's some good, there's some bad, but I'm probably being picky through 3 games.
Gotcha. Well, Jake, last thing we have for you today, we always like to have a score prediction ahead of this game. And since you are the guest on the podcast, want to give you the opportunity, the first crack at the score in this matchup. What's the score and who do you have winning in this game?
Yeah, so I'm going to pick the Rams in this one. I do think they bounce back. They go 2-2, head back to SoFi with a chance to knock off the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles. But it's not going to be an easy one. And so the reason I say that is because I do think the Rams at the beginning of the game might even get off to kind of a lackluster start. They're on a albeit it's not a super short week. It's only by 1 day. But that 1 day can make all the difference. And I do think it'll cause them to be a little lackluster coming out. I'm sure you'll have Rams fans freaking out, calling the season over. But I think in the second half, Sean McVay, who has coached in 2 Super Bowls and has a lot of experience versus Steichen, the rookie head coach. He's going to outcoach him in the second half, and I think the Rams will pull away with a 27-20 win.
Gotcha. I have to pick Indianapolis because I actually have not picked them at all. Well, maybe the Houston game, but I haven't picked them in the 2 games where I would say I feel like it's going to be a competitive game. So I have to give them credit. I have to pick them in this game. Also you mentioned the Rams coming off a short week. I do think that is in Indianapolis's favor. They've been able to have an extra day of recovery, an extra day of practice, and the Rams going from Cincinnati back to LA, back to the West Coast or back to the East Coast. It's a lot there. So I think it's going to be a decently high scoring game in this matchup. I'm going to go 24-20 Indianapolis in this game, but I do think it ultimately will come down to 1 possession. I think it will be one of those games where it does come down to who does have the ball, who does control the clock, because both these teams can run the ball, both these teams can establish that. It's ultimately going to come down to, I think the trenches are going to be a big one in this game for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we'll probably see Stafford will throw the ball a little bit more as far as touchdowns are concerned. I think we'll see more touchdowns from Stafford. I think he only has 2 on the season, 4 picks, which it's frustrating because it doesn't really represent how well he's playing. And I think I want to put that out there because it's very easy to say, oh, he's got 4 interceptions. Only one of them, as I've watched, is really, I would say, his fault. The other 2, one was tipped off of his own running back. He just, he dropped it. And then the other one was tipped at the line of scrimmage where the guy just made a hell of a play, which it's nothing you could do there. But I think he's going to throw for some touchdowns in this one. I think they'll get the run game going again with Kyron Williams. Maybe there's some optimism there. I don't know. But I think the defense is going to be the highlight in this one once again. Down the stretch, I think you're going to see Ahkello Witherspoon lock down Michael Pittman. And I think that is going to be really the key to winning this game. Because obviously we know what Michael Pittman can do. But I think Ahkello, once again, will be up for the challenge based on what he's done against who he's gone up against.
Awesome. Well, Jake, thanks so much for coming on, man. Really do appreciate it. Good luck on Sunday, but we always tell our guests not too much luck because we're a Colts win here. But seriously, man, thank you so much. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, find your work, and all the stuff you do over there?
Yeah, absolutely, Cody. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry, I'm not kind of under the weather a little bit, if you couldn't tell. I don't know why, but appreciate you having me. You can find me at JK Bogan on all my social media accounts, but on Twitter specifically, in my bio, you can find the Linktree link. And if you want to follow me on any of that type of stuff or check out anything that I'm working on, it's all going to be right there.
Awesome. Be sure to go check that out, guys. Again, thank you, Jake. Really appreciate it. And thank you guys for tuning in. If you are new to the channel or if you're still here checking us out, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to turn on that notification bell so that you are in the loop when we drop new content just like this. That'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.